Everything you've been told about the pyramids is wrong, not because historians lied, not because archaeologists made mistakes, but because every time we think we've finally figured out how the pyramids were built, we discover something that makes the mystery even bigger. For centuries, people have stared at the Great Pyramid of Giza and asked the same question. How did ancient Egyptians build something like this? A structure containing more than 2 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as a fully grown elephant, built more than 4,500 years ago, without electricity, without cranes, without modern machines. And for a long time, people came up with their own answers. Some said it was impossible. Some said aliens must have helped. Others believed a lost civilization had access to knowledge we no longer possess. But the strange thing is, the more evidence we discover, the less those theories seem necessary, because the real story is already unbelievable enough. Let's start with one of the biggest myths. For generations, people believed the pyramids were built by slaves. Movies showed thousands of exhausted workers being forced to drag giant stones across the desert, while guards watched over them. It seemed like the perfect explanation, until archaeologists started digging. Near the pyramids, researchers discovered entire workers' villages, not prison camps, villages. They found bakeries, sleeping quarters, tools, food supplies, even tombs belonging to the workers themselves. And suddenly the story changed. These weren't slaves. Many were skilled workers, engineers, stonecutters, surveyors, people who were actually respected for their work. And if that discovery wasn't surprising enough, archaeologists later found graffiti left behind by some of the workers, actual messages written over 4,000 years ago. One team even called themselves the Friends of Khufu. Think about that. For thousands of years, people looked at the pyramids and imagined anonymous workers. Then one day we discovered their names. The mystery wasn't who built the pyramids anymore. The mystery became how. And that's where things get really interesting, because before the Egyptians could build the pyramid, they first had to move the stone. Lots of stone. An unbelievable amount of stone. Most of the limestone came from quarries near Giza, but some of the massive granite blocks came from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away. Imagine moving stones weighing dozens of tons without trucks, without trains, without engines. For years, nobody knew how they managed it. Then, in 2013, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary, an ancient document known today as the Diary of Mera. And this wasn't just any document. It was written by a man who was actually involved in the pyramid project. For the first time in history, researchers were reading notes left behind by someone who had witnessed the construction era himself. In his writings, Mera describes transporting massive limestone blocks by boat through waterways connected to the Nile. Suddenly, one piece of the puzzle finally made sense. The Nile wasn't just a river, it was a giant transportation system. The Egyptians weren't dragging every stone across endless desert. They were moving huge amounts of material by water. And that discovery completely changed how historians viewed pyramid construction. But transporting the stones was only the beginning, because once the blocks arrived at Giza, someone still had to move them. And that's where another fascinating clue appears. In an ancient Egyptian painting, workers are shown pulling a giant statue on a wooden sled. Nothing unusual there, except for one strange detail. A man standing at the front is pouring water onto the sand. For years, nobody paid much attention to it. Then scientists tested the idea, and what they discovered was brilliant. Wet sand creates less friction than dry sand, meaning workers could move enormous weights far more easily. In other words, 4,500 years ago, the Egyptians understood a simple engineering trick that scientists would later confirm was actually effective. At this point, the mystery seems almost solved. We know where the stones came from. We know how many of them travelled. We know how they likely crossed the Nile. We even know how they may have been dragged across land. But then we reach the biggest challenge of all, getting the stones up, higher and higher and higher, until they formed one of the tallest structures on Earth. The first explanation seemed obvious. Ramps. Build a giant ramp. Drag the stones upward. Problem solved. For years, this was the leading theory, until researchers started doing the math. And that's when things got weird. A ramp large enough to reach the top of the Great Pyramid would have been enormous. Some estimates suggested it might require almost as much material as the pyramid itself, which created a new mystery. If such a ramp existed, where did it go? Why can't we find it? And just like that, one solution created another problem. So researchers began searching for alternatives. Maybe the ramps weren't straight. Maybe they zigzagged along the sides. Maybe they wrapped around the pyramid like a spiral staircase. Each theory solved certain problems and created new ones. Then a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed something completely different. What if the ramp wasn't outside the pyramid? What if it was inside? According to his theory, workers may have built an internal ramp hidden within the structure itself. As the pyramid grew taller, stones could be moved through passageways concealed inside the monument. It sounded crazy, until computer simulations suggested it might actually work. For the first time, researchers had a theory that explained how stones could be lifted without leaving behind evidence of a gigantic external ramp. Even today, some experts find the idea convincing. Others remain skeptical, and that's exactly what makes the pyramid so fascinating. Every answer creates another question. Then came one of the most shocking discoveries of all. In 2017, scientists used cosmic ray scanning technology to look inside the Great Pyramid. They weren't drilling, they weren't digging. They were essentially using particles from space to see through stone. What they found stunned the world. A massive hidden void, more than 30 meters long. A space nobody knew existed. A space that had remained hidden for thousands of years. Immediately, theories exploded across the internet. Was it a secret chamber? A hidden passage? Part of the construction process? Nobody knew. And the truth is, nobody still knows. Even after centuries of study, even after satellites, even after lasers, even after advanced scanning technology. The Great Pyramid continues to keep some of its secrets. But here's what we've learned. The evidence strongly suggests that ancient Egyptians built the pyramids themselves. Not aliens, not a lost super civilization, not magic, humans. Brilliant, organized, incredibly determined humans. They transported stone using the Nile. They moved enormous blocks across land. They developed construction techniques thousands of years ahead of their time, and somehow created a monument so extraordinary that people are still arguing about it 4,500 years later. Maybe one day we'll discover exactly which method they used. Maybe another hidden chamber will be found. Maybe another ancient document is still waiting beneath the sand. But until that day comes, the pyramids remain one of humanity's greatest mysteries. Not because we know nothing, but because every new discovery reveals just how remarkable the people who built them really were.